tell you, this thing has taken a few whammo hits. Then we'll just wham on it a little bit. Hi there, folks, and welcome to another episode of Michael's Backyard Marina. I'm your host, Michael, and today we're blessed with some unseasonably warm weather. It's January 1st. Happy New Year to everybody out there. Let's make 2023 a fantastic year for the Backyard Marina and YouTube in general. I have rescued this boat and trailer from over in Illinois, and it's, like I said, it's 43 degrees today, so I got to do some outside work. I will be, it's overcast, cloudy. There's a possible chance of light rain in the next 10 minutes, but we're going to see what we can get done out here. And what we're going to do here on this old 16-foot John boat, this 16-foot by extra wide John boat that I picked up, and it needs some TLC. Now, I'm not trying to make this a perfect John boat by any stretch of the imagination. This is my new ultra stable boat for testing out outboards, anywhere from a 5-horse all the way up to a 45 or 50 horse I hang on the back of here. And it's for testing those boats to get them out in the water and see how they perform before I pass them on to the next owner. Well, this one here is a 1983 PolarKraft, and it has what I'm understanding looks like and could be a 1983 transom, as far as the wood goes. The wood needs some work. Let's look in here a little closer and I'll show you what I mean. Now, as you can see here, this wood isn't bad. I mean, I can stick my knife blade in it a little bit. Probably no more than I could brand new wood. But it just has the appearance, and I can see how, boy, it's really not that awful. But this got, like this layer here, it's just cracked. Looks like it could just delaminate. It's had moisture. It's been exposed to moisture. All the wood's dark over here. Same way over this area here. Same kind of thing. I just think it's going to be worthwhile, especially with what I want to put it through. I want to introduce it into some new wood. And the nice thing is this does have 3 struts back here. Makes it very sturdy, which I'm really happy to see. The boat seems to be very, very solid overall, which I'm happy to see that. The other feature that I really enjoyed about the boat when I looked at it was this half seat here. So with the half seat, the nice thing about it is, you're over here, steering is going to be over in this section here. And then you can have your big 5 or 10 or 15 gallon gas tank sitting right there, which is going to make it very nice. So without further ado, let's go ahead. It looks like this thing has a bunch of deep wall. Looks like it's going to take, these are 1/4-20s, it's going to take some 7/16 bolts. Looks like if I take all these bolts out and this top cap right here, there's bolts around this comes off, and I should be able to slide this piece of wood out so I can copy it. People put a lot of goo around these bolts, which is nice when they put them in because that keeps it from leaking. But the other thing I'm planning on doing with this is I want to make this universal. I want to make a jack plate here that is adjustable. So 5 inches of adjustment basically. Now I'm not doing my adjustments to try to make it so this boat will go fast as it can go in the shallowest as water as it can go in. The purpose for me putting a jack plate on here is so I can run short shaft and long shaft motors. Outboards, that would be very nice. But I can tell you, this thing has taken a few whammo hits that I'm not sure if I'll be able to straighten out on the bottom here. So there's no way a drain plug's fitting in there unless I do some work to it. Let me show you this big old dent back here. Really not sure what happened here, but it's got a wrinkle right here, a wrinkle here. This hole is smashed partway shut. But I'm going to see if I can warm this up and massage it back down into shape. I think I can do it without doing too much more damage to the boat. But first, let's go ahead and get all these bolts out and get that taken care of. Well, overall, that wasn't too hard to take out. Now, the wood wasn't crazy rotten. You can see this top edge was a little bit rotted here, you know, but on the back side, still looked pretty good. And some of the bolts were rusted about halfway into. A couple of them broke, but you can see where they definitely had moisture and whatnot. I don't think this wood may or may not ever been treated or sealed. You know, it could have been better. When it goes back in, I'll guarantee I'll make it better. But it's going to be a pretty simple pattern to cut out. I wouldn't see any reason why to make this any different than what was in there. I don't need it to go down any deeper. Some of you might go, well, take it down deeper, give that thing some more strength. Well, there's a couple things that's wrong with that statement. Is a lot of these other boats that have wooden, all my Starcrafts have wood in the back, they keep it about that far off the bottom of the boat. And there's a reason for that, I feel. You guys could correct me if I'm wrong, but I would think that it's that way for the simple reason moisture and water don't sit on it. When you leave water in your boat or have water in your back of your boat, it doesn't sit there and just soak up into your wood. It's just strictly in the aluminum part of the boat. All right, well, I'm pretty happy with how this all turned out so far. The trick's gonna be to see if I can actually straighten this out some. I'm not so sure I'll be able to, but should be a noisy proposition, that's for sure. About 39 bolts holding this whole thing in. Now, one thing I'm going to do when I replace them, I'm going to put stainless bolts back in so they don't rust. Yeah, it's more than I should have to do, but you know, I just got to do it that way. Now, in case you were wondering, Michael, what are you doing with that torch on that aluminum? Well, and that heat gun. Well, if you get this stuff up to about 300 to 400 degrees, it's not enough to anneal it, but it does get the molecules excited enough to move around for you. See, I'm about 330 degrees right now. That way, when I hammer on this thing, it'll actually just bend and form without cracking. Now I'm at 482 there. I don't want to get that too much hotter. Then we'll just wham on it a little bit. Now that had a pretty good whammo in it. And by heating it up between 300 and 450 degrees, I was able to massage this all back. And I was able to make this is a round shaft here. I was able to also massage that hole, make this 1 inch, basically 1 inch round shaft fit right through there. So that now that a plug actually stands a snowball's chance of sealing. Let's take a look at the backside here. Now that might look a little rough from where the paint's knocked off of it and stuff. And it's not perfectly smooth, but there's not that big heavy fold and wrinkle in it anymore. It's actually shaped back almost factory. But now when I put my new plywood in here, we can suck that up tight and the back of the transom will actually look pretty darn flat. Here's a look at it from this angle. There's a little bit of, that could probably come out just a little bit, but you know, I'm gonna leave it. I think it's just fine. I'm just not gonna worry about it. That's a long ways from where it was, which actually makes me pretty darn happy. Alrighty, we seem to have the back of the transom straightened out decent enough. So now I'm inside, we're gonna cut some new pieces of wood. This wood is not original to the boat, I don't feel. It may be, but it may not be. It's got some age on it, that's for sure. But the one piece that was at the back of the boat, against the back of the transom, against the aluminum, is a well-cut piece. It's cut very nice. And this other piece, not so much. I don't know if you can see that, but this thing has a nice curve to it. Once it's been taken out of the boat and sat in my shop overnight, yeah, it's a little bit more warped. It doesn't, when you lay it on top of the other one, it doesn't lay right directly on top of it. It's, you know, it's not as good a cut piece. Let's just say that. So I'm going to do something a little different than most people do, and maybe some people do. I don't know. But I've got 2 sheets of 3/4 inch, or I need 2 pieces of 3/4 inch. And I've got a sheet. This is a sheet that I had laying around. I'll tell you where this came from. This is an exterior BC Group 1 exterior plywood. It is 23/32, which is just under, it's like 0.703. It's just under 3/4 of an inch. I need an 1.5 inch transom. And I'm pretty sure that's what this was when it started its life as a boat transom as well, or as a sheet of plywood when it, you know, in its infancy. Let's just say that. I don't know that this transom was 40 years old. You know, it's a 1983 boat, but we're going to use this exterior grade. Now, some of you are going to already keyboarding. You need to use marine grade plywood. You need to use Coosa board. You need to, I hear you. I've used marine grade. I have not used Coosa. I priced a piece of Coosa big enough to do this. The only way I could get a piece of Coosa big enough to do this, because it's got to be 63 inches wide at the corners. The only way to get that is to buy a full sheet, and I'm not spending $700 to $900 on a sheet of Coosa. Obviously, that would be the ideal fix. But I only paid $800 for the boat and 2 motors and a trailer. I'm not going to spend, you know, that much money on a transom as well. So I'm not trying to do it on the cheap, but I'm going to do things, you know, this thing, if it lasts 20 years, let's just say it lasts 20 years. I'll be surprised if I own this boat for 20 years, but I could. I'm going to be testing outboard motors for a long, long time, and this boat may be the boat, or something better may come along, or somebody might make me an offer I can't refuse on this boat. So what I'm doing here, I'm going to recut 2 new pieces. I'm also going to use these holes. This thing has like 39 holes in the boat. 12 of them are just down here where the knee brace is at. But they got it. This thing is bolted in, and they used some rusty bolts as we showed you earlier. They weren't rusty when they went in. But I'm going to replace everything with stainless bolts, stainless washers, and nylock nuts. Stainless nylocking nuts. And but anyway, let's get busy. I'm going to show you how I'm going to put this together. I'm not going to take you in slow motion, step by step, but first thing I did was trace this out on the wood. Next, I'm going to cut it. Then I'm going to cut a second one just like it. Okay, I didn't want to bore you folks with the, sawing the pieces out. But I did take my best piece, obviously, and I traced it. And then I got a stainless steel straight edge here that I laid down. I used it as my saw guide so I could get a perfectly straight cut on both top, bottom, and the ends. And then I put the two together. Now, this isn't a permanent put together yet. You'll see these blue marks here and here. I did that for a reason. That is where all the bolt holes are that are in the original piece of wood. I took spray paint and I just kind of sprayed over it so I could see where they are. Because the last thing I wanted to do is end up with a wood screw like I got here, dead center of my, in a bolt hole spot. So now what I've done is I've put screws in it. I also sanded these edges, rounded them off here and here to help guide it down in and get it in a little smoother. But it's also going to serve a second purpose. Because when I put this back together, these screws are going to find their same hole, which is going to be really important because, when you put glue on something, it likes to move around. And now I can lay this open just like this. Man, that's some straight cuts. Those things don't even, that's no gap there. I want to sand this a little bit, smooth it up some with some really coarse sandpaper to get some of this dirt off of it. Then I'll wipe it clean, and then we're going to glue it together. Okay, now that we've got the wood sanded up nice, it's not perfectly smooth, but I'm not going for perfectly smooth. I just wanted to knock some stuff off of it. That's all I was after. Now I'm using my shop vac with my fuzzy brush on it, which is going to pick up all that extra dust. And I'll take me a tack cloth and run over it and try not to get splinters in my hand. That makes her pretty clean. Now we're going to spread some of this. I'm using Type Bond number 3 Ultimate Wood Glue. Super strength, longer assembly time, water cleanup. Now, this is indoor-outdoor, exterior-interior glue. So we're going to just coat this thing. So we want this glue to fill every single void on here. I want this to become one solid thing. And you guys know if you used any wood glue, that the wood glue bond will be stronger than the actual wood itself. Now I'm going to take this and kind of make sure I cover all the wood here. Now, I've seen people do it on one half and then stick the other half to it. I was always wondering, why not do both sides? Because I've seen them do this and then they'll do some more of that over there. And I'm not sure. This way I know it's, kind of filling in some of the voids and cracks here. And it's going to absorb some of it, which I want. Well, this wood's just drinking it up, which is a good thing. I wouldn't have guessed it would drink up this much glue, but it does, which is good. That's good. We're going to go ahead now. I seem to have that spread around pretty decent. I'm going to put a bead like this around the outside edges. Because I want to get some squeeze out here. All right. Now the way I've done this, I have this set up. I have this set up so I can flip it over. Set it right on top of this piece. And as you can see, it's going to want to try to slide around. And if you were just to clamp it right now, she would get away from you. But now that I have the screws, these screws are going to locate it for me. All I got to do is get it close, and that screw will as you can see, I just take that right on down. And it's picking up that old hole, and it's making it line up really good. Now we're going to get my clamps a hold of it. We're going to put clamps all the way around this thing, as many as I got. So you can see a little gap right here. Yep, and squeeze that right out. Perfect. Now that she's screwed and glued on the head side I put toward the back of the transom. So none of these screw heads will be visible. Once it's in the boat, all you'll see is this, and this will be sanded off nice and clean. But now what I'm going to do is go ahead and sand this down. And as you can see here, we've got some pockets here, but that's okay. We're going to cover this thing in resin. Alright, what I did here is I mixed up some fiberglass resin. It's stuff you can buy at your local big box store or your automotive store. And I mixed up about 16 ounces. And I have about that much left over out of 16 ounces. That's enough to cover this side and fill in all the screw holes. It's also filled in the knot holes. And I put it on there kind of heavy. We're going to let this set up. And that'll be the layer I need on this side. Once this sets up, and you see I didn't do the edges. When I flip it over is when I'll get the edges. But yeah, because the glue's still in there drying, and I wanted to get one side started, so that's what I did. I think it's turning out pretty good so far. It's going to be one heck of a transom. Now let's do a quick little recap on what we've got going on here. We've taken this piece of old plywood. Now, but keep in mind this plywood was weathered around the edges because this thing sat out, the sheet of plywood sat out in the weather for an entire year, maybe longer, as a sign stand that had a banner hooked to it. And when it was taken down, it was going to be scrapped. So I said, as always, I'll take the scrap, please, and I'll turn it in. And what I do today, I'm turning it into a boat transom. Now, a lot of you out there are probably just screaming at me right now going, you can't possibly use CDX or, exterior plywood. You need marine grade plywood. Well, marine grade plywood, the big difference in it between that and regular plywood is the glue that they use on marine grade plywood. I think exterior plywood, they also have a better glue in it as well versus your regular interior plywood. And the glue is just holding the things together. Keep in mind, it isn't special plywood that won't rot, okay? Won't rot, won't deteriorate. The glue is the big key there. Otherwise, it's just regular wood, and you don't want to use treated wood against your aluminum boat. Whatever that's in that treatment will have a chemical reaction with your boat hull, and you don't want that either. So what I've done here, you saw me do kind of a fast method, I guess you might call it. A lot of people would put clamps on it and let the glue dry for 24 hours before they did anything else. But I clamped it, and then I put screws in it. And you can see, as you do that, I worked my way down the board, and you can see I squeezed the glue out all the way around. So that tells me I'm getting a good pull together. And I'm only using the they're a deck screw. They're a triple-coated gold deck screw that is designed for exterior work, obviously, but they're 1.25 inches long. I did that for a reason. I didn't want it to go through, but I also wanted to be able to bury it in the wood. And this is a total of 1.5 inches thick now. So this is just the right amount to bury it, not have any point sticking out the other side. And then I went ahead and mixed up my resin. Now resin I mixed up here is supposed to have a working time of 8 to 10 minutes. With the amount of accelerator I put in it or activator I put in it, I put in 16 ounces, and you're supposed to do about a drop per ounce. And I ended up putting 170 drops in my 16 ounces so it can actually go off a little faster. I'll be able to tell in my container here when it goes off, because it'll be, you know, this brush, it's still pretty liquidy right now. But I've only been working this about 5 minutes. But I worked the brush back and forth to make sure I filled in all the screw heads. Because you guys might be out, well, what happens when that screw head has a chemical reaction? It can't. It's buried behind the resin. It is locked in. It's part of the wood now. To never be removed. But when this thing comes out again, it's going to come out in one piece just like the original piece did. Now the disadvantage to the original piece was never glued together. And if it was, the glue went away because there's no evidence of it that I can see. This one's glued together, so this board has even more strength than the original had. The original one had the ability to flex amongst itself. So this way here, this is, I'm thrilled with how this is turning out so far. You know, I'm not trying to make this boat pristine and new, but I want to make it good enough to do what I want to do and last a long time. You know, there again, I don't know how old the original plywood is, but it's definitely got some age on it. And there again, if you don't cover your boats, that plywood could be 5 years old for all I know. And because the boat wasn't covered and protected, it aged like a son of a gun. Me, I put covers on my boat. So this, you know, I did a transom in another boat where I put the resin, and then I put some clear gel or some white gel coat over it. And a year later, was it a year? Over a year later, that transom looked like I just put it in the day before because no moisture can get in it. This resin locks it up tight. Now you can use some outdoor paint and other stuff like that. The other thing I'm going to do with this boat that's a little different than other boats is, like I think I mentioned earlier, is I'm going to put a jack plate on it. I'm going to create my own jack plate to bolt on the back of this boat so I can adjust it up 5 inches or down 5 inches in order for long shaft or short shaft motors, because I want to be able to test them all. All right, I'm going to pause here for a bit. We'll be back when we're doing the other side or something fun. And I'm looking at the reflection in here, and it all looks like it's covered. I put it on kind of heavy. I knew this wood would drink up some of this, and it looks like that's what it's doing. What I'll do when I flip it over is I'll sand the other side a little bit, and I'll also sand the edges, get everything nice and clean, and then I'll put a nice resin coat on all that as well. I may go with 2 coats, but I think one coat may suffice. You know, let's not overdo it. All right, well, let's clean this shop up because I got sawdust everywhere in here now. But the nice thing is, since I've organized my shop, I've got room to bring in a 4x8 sheet of plywood and walk around it. That wasn't going to happen about 3 weeks ago, but it can happen today. All right, now that we've got our board sealed up with 2 layers of resin, front, back, top, bottom, edges, all the way around, I've actually got these, what do I call them? They're like Bondo spreaders. You know, those little spreader things, they're plastic. I kind of pried these out and slid these in between, so as I get this thing massaged down into place, it's going to keep these things from digging in and making a mess out of my finish. Man, she's going right down in there real nice. A little tight on the ends. We're trying to take her down so she's flush with the back, like it was originally. Perfect. Man, that fits really, really well. Yep, let's flush for the top now. Man, that looks really, really good. Fits nice. Let's see if we can get these pieces here snuck out now. Should be pretty easy, I would think. There we go. This is our cap that was on it. Well, that's a little bit too, the cap don't fit anymore. But it is kind of wavy. How much or shorter are we? We may have to do a little bit of massaging on this piece to get her back into shape. We got our other cross piece that'll all right. That's going to be one solid transom, I'll tell you that. Plenty of clamp space here for a, this is off an 18 horse fast twin. That'll work perfect. Burden. Now I don't have this fully clamped down. I'm not trying to leave marks on my surface here. That's for sure. And because we're going to have a jack plate on here that's going to put this, you know, somewhere back here. Up a little higher, down a little lower, you know, somewhere in between there. Well, now for the nerve-wracking part of putting holes in my wood. And I'll show you how I'm going to do that here in just a minute. Right now, all the bolts that were passing through here that they had used were 1/4-inch bolts. And I've got a whole bunch of stainless ones to try and use. All right, one thing I wanted to show you folks, I got most of the bolts back in, still doing a few more. Still got a few more to do. But when you're putting in these bolts, and if you're using stainless, which I recommend you use, make sure you put never seize on the threads, because they will and can gall up on you. And when they do, they lock into place and you can't get it to go forward or backwards. So far, everything's looking fantastic. Now, I have been wiping up some of the excess marine grade silicone that I've used around these bolts. Not getting rid of all of it, but, you know, just getting the boogers and the hanger offers there, you know, things that just look bad. But so far, I'm pretty happy with how this is turning out. It's looking pretty good. And we're going to do a recap here in a little bit about all the cost of the hardware, and also we'll talk about, yeah, just the amount of time it probably should take you. But we're going to finish. I got about 4 or 5 more bolts to put in, and we'll check back in with you right after we're done with those. As you can see here, we've got 110% of all the bolts back in place. 38 bolts. There's 38 holes in this transom, believe it or not, between the handles and the struts and the supports, and just a couple of them that are just down below, and then the corner pieces. I mean, that's a lot of holes that are in the transom that I had to plug up. So you have to take your time, and I'm putting the silicone on it, and, you know, run the bolts through, trying to make sure I get 100% sealing back up. This had a plate here that's screwed in right here, and it's not going back on. Matter of fact, it went, I think it might have went this way. We're not putting this back on, and for the simple reason, I'm not going to be clamping motors or outboards right up to this transom. I'm going to make a jack plate where I'll start on that tomorrow. It won't be a part of this video, but it'll be a part of an upcoming video. So we're gonna just leave that off so we can just, you know, let's just look at our pretty little wood we got here. That turned out pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. This thing, you know, it's solid. It ain't going nowhere fast. But the cool part is we've got this thing back together. We've got the old wood out, the new wood in, and I bought a piece of 16th inch angle by 1.5 inches that I put on here. You'll see it from the back side here in a minute. That I put on top. I siliconed it down on top so moisture can't get in this way and just hang out in, you know. But this resin is tough. It's tough stuff. It's going to be there a long time. It's going to protect that wood. You know, 5 years from now, this transom is probably going to look very similar to how it looks today, as long as I own it. Because for the simple reason, I do it right. Okay, well, let me show you the back of it real quick, and then we'll go on to some other details. Now, as you can see here, we have a lot of holes that were there, and that's how it was originally done, I feel. Just looking at all the struts and supports, they all had this type of, you know, it was connected up this way. But now I've got all these in here with stainless. I used fender washers to kind of distribute the load out a little bit. And I think it's going to hold up pretty good. And I can paint over it if I want, but I think I'll just leave it like that. I kind of like the almost looks like it's been riveted look. We got our 2 grab handles back in place here. They look fantastic. They're strong, and they're also held in with stainless bolts as well. Alrighty, let's talk turkey here. Okay, let's see what the meat and potatoes. What did it cost us to do this? Well, I wanted to show you these. These are my leftover resin from each batch. I had mixed up a 16-ounce batch, a 14-ounce batch, and an 18-ounce and a 10-ounce batch of resin for my 4 coats, 2 on each side, and a total of 58 ounces, which means the resin cost me about $32 for this thing. But that's the leftover from the first mix, the second mix, third mix didn't quite absorb as much as I thought it was going to. And the fourth mix, this is the leftovers with the brush stuck in it. I used a 3-inch, you know, chip brush. You can pick those up relatively cheap. I highly recommend the brushes. You know, buy a brush, buy these little measuring cups. They're handy. The way I mix that stuff up, you know, it says right on there, on the Bondo brand anyway, that you put 1 drop of activator, which comes in those little tubes, 1 drop per ounce of resin. Mix it up. I usually went about 10 drops more, so if I had an 18-ounce, I put 190 drops in there, 195 drops in there. Mix it up thoroughly. Make sure you mix it up really, really well. Otherwise, it might not completely cure it. It might stay sticky longer than you plan for it to. But the nice thing about this stuff, it cures in like 2 hours. Now, the time frame. Let's talk about the time frame it took me to do this. I took the transom out on a weekend, and right now it's the following weekend. The last weekend was pretty warm, nice. I mean, it was up in the 40s, and it was like, oh, cool, I can get that done. Well, then it turned cold, and I'm back in here this weekend, 1 week later, pretty much exactly 1 week later, transom's complete. But what I did in the evenings is I would sand, put a coat of resin on, go in the house and eat supper, and then let that thing cure. 24 hours later, I'm doing another coat 24 hours later. And I did, as between coats, I did sand it with 80 grit sandpaper. So I sanded the initial wood with 80 grit, and then after I had the resin on, the next night I sanded that resin with 80 grit so it'd have something to bite and hold on to when you put the next layer on. Now let's talk cost. So I bought all stainless hardware from the local big box stores. Might not be what I would call superior quality, but it looks like it's going to be just fine. I didn't twist any of the bolts off when I was tightening them down, and I've tightened them down pretty good. Now, like I said earlier, you want to make sure, for sure, you use some anti-seize on the stainless, because when you got a stainless nut on a stainless bolt, it doesn't take much for it to gald, and then once it galds and that metal tears against itself, it will lock it up. I had to cut 2 of my bolts out that locked up before they bottomed out, and I had to cut the heads off and put in a new bolt and start it again. So use your anti-seize. You try it without it all you want, but I recommend it. So we had $10 worth of nuts, $15 worth of washers, $32 worth of resin, $10 worth of, you know, the brushes, you know, the disposable stuff here in the containers. And then we had about $12 worth of marine grade silicone. I used about, this silicone I was using was about $30 a tube from 3M. And I used about a half a tube, maybe a little less than half a tube. Let's call it that. So I'm saying $12. So we got $94 wrapped up in replacing this transom. Now, as you guys know, I did not buy the wood. I used wood that I had laying around the house here. But if I did buy it, and I was going to buy the BCA wood, which is interior, exterior, both sides sanded, you could get the fancy stuff. The total price would have been $140 to replace that transom. Now, is that a lot of money for that boat? Well, no, not really. It is and it isn't. Let's keep in mind, I got 2 outboards that were probably worth the $800 that I paid for this boat. So I'm counting that I got the boat and trailer. Now, keep in mind that trailer that if you guys followed me on that video, that trailer is junk. The only thing that's somewhat salvageable would be the tires, but those tires aren't even a regular 4-bolt pattern. So it basically becomes useless. Now, I might be able to use this axle for something around the marina to make a little cart or something out of it. I don't know. Most of it's going to the scrapyard. Because the trailer hitch, it's the trailer tongue jack might be the only salvageable thing off of the trailer, I'll be honest with you. But I'm really happy with how this turned out. It looks fantastic. There again, we weren't going for pretty. And the other thing that I ran into is you could buy the inch and a half, 2 inch long stainless. Then I actually really would like to have had 2 1/4. 2 1/4 would have made the nuts be almost flush with the end of the bolts, nothing really sticking out. The next one I could buy up was only 3. Now, I'm sure if I went to some McMaster car or MSC direct online, I could have ordered them in. I'd have paid a little bit more. I'd have paid shipping and all that fun stuff. Or maybe I'd have paid the same. I don't know. But I was okay with the bolts being a little long, and I'll tell you why. Sometimes it's nice if you end up starting to run some wiring or any kind of electrical or some fuel line and different things like that, and you want things to hang it off of. Those bolts sticking out are actually pretty handy for putting those little, they're kind of like a loop. They come down and you can bolt something and it's got a loop. So wires or fuel line or, you know, it can hang some stuff in there. What I'm going to do with the ones that rest of them that are protruding so I don't, you know, jab myself too many times on them. I shouldn't, because it's at the very back of the boat. I shouldn't. But I'm going to buy these. You can buy these little like plastic covers that cover over different things, and you just push them on. They're blind on the one end. You can just slip them on. Gives it a nice clean look. You just do stuff like that. What else was I going to share with you? I think that was about it. So 1 week's worth of time. Take your time. You'll have a powerfully good result. And there again, I mentioned it before. The reason I didn't put that metal plate on is I'm going to put a jack plate on this thing because I want to be able to adjust the transom height up, you know, from this height basically, and up 5 more inches, so I can hang some of these long shafts on here that I've got laying around here that I'll be working on, and I can take those to the lake and try them out and make sure they're working, you know, because if you sink them 5 inches deeper than they should be, yep, the words are hard. If you sink it down 5 inches deeper than it's supposed to run, it will work, but it won't be as efficient, and it won't give a good honest test of that outboard. All right. Well, I guess that's it, folks. I hope you enjoyed this video. This is Michael saying if it ain't broke, fix it till it is. We'll see you in the next video. We got some cool stuff coming up for you. The next thing I'm going to work on is the jack plate. But the next video will probably be me putting the gearbox back on the 50 horse and tearing into them carburetors. You guys have been out there waiting for me to tear into them carburetors. And then I'll also show you, a lot of you have been asking about the pressure tester that I created. I'll dissect that apart for you. And I'll put the links in the video on the next video to that thing. So you can go and buy all the components you want to buy to make your own and test your own gearboxes. All right. Well, that's enough of that. You guys have fun. Be kind to each other. Treat each other like you want to be treated. And I'll see you on the next video. Peace out. You see where some used to be, they've fallen off. You know, I was just telling him a little bit ago, I wonder what that block is, if that can be converted to a 35. Because all it is intake reed valve plate, carburetor, and exhaust, that exhaust plate that, you know, that was leaking, we thought was leaking. Yeah. You replace those 3 things and it's a 35. That's what I'm doing in that other 20 horse. That's the one with the bigger secret.
Well, that'd be cool if you get that done. We can put one at 35 too.
Yeah.
Right? And if we get the race with that, if we can do it, it's kind of cool.
Yep.
I mean, obviously it's going to make a difference, but the biggest thing is to help keep the front end out of the water.
Oh yeah.
It should.
Oh yeah, get the front end out of the water and have enough power to go faster to keep it up on plane.